Warning, the Savage Nation contains adult language, adult content, psychological nudity. Listener discretion is advised. And now, the world's most exciting podcast, The Savage Nation, home of borders, language, culture. And here he is, New York Times best-selling author and National Radio Hall of Fame inductee, Michael Savage.
Are there words about a pandemic at this point?
No, we're not at all, and we have it totally under control. It's one person coming in from China, and we have it under control. It's going to be just fine.
Nice. It's nice. It's going to be fine. Don't worry about it. They're building a hospital in China in 6 days. You don't feel symptoms for 10 days. Virologist who helped discover SARS offers chilling take on coronavirus outbreak. Everyone will get infected. A nurse at the corpse-strewn hospital says the quarantine is failing. But, hey, everything will be fine. Don't worry about a thing. I don't blame Donald Trump. He's a prisoner of his own government. He's a prisoner of the idiots who run the CDC and the NIH. All politicians, they've thrown away their medical credentials for political expediency, and we the people sit here like dummies. I wouldn't trust the government to tell me the truth about anything. You know, this reminds me of, Nero fiddled while Rome burned. Look at these schmucks called the senators. Day in and day out, the same thing, the same story, impeachment, impeachment, impeachment. Meanwhile, the world's burning. This epidemic is getting out of control. It's getting out of control in China. It's spreading to other countries. 22 states are on alert. And health experts issued an ominous warning about a coronavirus pandemic 3 months ago. And in their simulation, they showed it could kill 65 million people. Now, I don't want to be accused of being an alarmist, but how about being a realist? Where is the difference between realism and alarmism? Can you tell me? Should I sit here and make believe this isn't the problem? And sit here like every other schmuck in the media talking about impeachment? That's what you want me to do? What am I going to say about impeachment? We have no effect on it whatsoever. It's up to those 100 yucks there in Senate. 100 yuckapucks there in the Senate have a decision, not you. We don't live in a democracy. We live in a hypocrisy. 100 schmucks are going to decide whether to impeach the president. Not me, not you. So what's the point of televising these hearings? No point whatsoever. It's just to distract the people from what's really going on in the world. Borders, porous borders. Drugs are flowing in at a record rate. Illegal aliens racing across the border at an illegal rate. At rates I've never seen anything like this. How many have come in from China since this started who were infected, who passed the so-called screening of the schmendricks at the airport? Screening. You don't show symptoms for 10 days. How many of them are working in restaurants right now? You don't know, huh? Oh, I'm not allowed to ask the question? Go to hell, I'm not allowed to ask the question. I'll ask any damn question I want. Now, I'm going to go back to the basics here. I'm going to go back to the beginnings of epidemiology. Don't worry, it's not a big word. It's the history, science of epidemics. It began with an evil white male, a doctor named John Snow. Somebody with occasional cortex ought to read about. The next time she wants to put down white people, that dumb idiot. Now, why am I mentioning epidemiology and cholera and John Snow? Because there's a valuable lesson for today. London, 1854, Soho, England. People and animals living in cramped and dirty quarters. A deadly outbreak of cholera is spreading. Doctors and scientists in those years believe it's caused by a miasma or bad air. Sound familiar? It sounds like Jerry Nadler. They theorize that particles from rotting matter and waste are getting into the air and making people sick with this disease. Who comes into the picture now? John Snow. Very well-known physician. He figures out that something other than the air might be responsible for the cholera epidemic. And so what does he do? He carefully maps the outbreak, and he finds that everyone who has been affected by this illness has something in common, a single connection in common. And what is it? They have all pumped water from the local Broad Street pump. So on September 8th, 1854, the father of epidemiology, Dr. John Snow, tests his theory by removing the pump's handle, and he effectively stops the outbreak, proving his theory and opening the door to modern epidemiology. John Snow was the first to use maps and records to track the spread of a disease back to its source. And today, these ideas provide the foundation for how we're supposed to find and stop diseases all over the world. We have far better tools than he did to identify and track illness. Labs, computer systems, in-depth knowledge of germs. But when you have political detectives in the CDC who have thrown away their scientific training at the NIH and the CDC, what good are all of the tools? What good are all the tools in the world if they're looking over their shoulder at political implications? So what am I saying? Living in a world where disease can spread around the globe very quickly, what's the most logical thing that you do? You don't need a PhD in epidemiology to know what to do. You need common sense. Common sense is you stop travel from China, and that's the end of the story. They themselves have introduced the quarantine, but not here. After all, how are we going to get the fentanyl into this country if you put it in a quarantine? I mean, you got to have that fentanyl flowing, don't you? Do you understand what I'm saying to you, that there are 40 million Chinese quarantined right now? There's a case in Chicago. 22 states are on alert. Europe is now seeing cases, and we're doing nothing but listening to these imbeciles at the CDC who are doing zero. Are you listening to me? Are you hearing me? A nurse is saying the quarantine is failing. A video has come out showing dead bodies in the halls of hospitals. It's not just hitting the young and the old. Young men are among the victims. Now, again, I'm not here to alarm you. I'm here to awaken you, because there are things you can do. Some things are commonsensical here in America. Very commonsensical. I mean, I have to spell it out for you what not to do and what to do. Your mother was right in a certain way. Avoid crowds. Your mother knew enough to stay away from people who were sick, right? And when flu season approached, or when you were feeling a little under the weather, she told you to do certain things that promoted healing. That was good mother's advice. And I then looked into that, and we all know that no medications currently exist on the market that can stop a viral infection, no matter what the quacks tell you. There are no drugs that can stop a viral infection. Now, there are some antiviral drugs, but they're not recommended in these cases as a preventive. They don't work. You understand? These antiviral drugs may be useful in treating serious diseases such as Ebola, but they're definitely of no use to prevent the viral infection. Your best defense, ladies and gentlemen of the Savage Nation, is a strong offense. And what does that mean? One, boost your immune system to lower your susceptibility to infection and disease. You see, if everyone could get the disease, they would get the disease. But everyone on earth is not going to get the disease. Some will have a powerful immune system, an immune system powerful enough to fight off the virus should they even contract it. There are known techniques for boosting your immunity, and any qualified medical doctor will tell you that. A good doctor will recommend diet with immune-enhancing foods, regular exercise, and sleep. You heard it all. I've done a whole show on epidemiology, a podcast, which you can probably find from last January. And you know what the number one factor in a strong immune system is? Sleep. Would you believe that? Rest. The body needs to restore itself. Without it, almost no matter what else you do, your body's going to break down. But there's much more to do. You can boost your immune system to maximum levels without using drugs. Now, a couple of years ago, I published a small pamphlet on Kindle called Diseases Without Borders. And I did it because there was EBV 68 coming in because of Obama. Remember that epidemic, the polio-like illness that Obama brought into this country because he was bringing the children who were infected from Honduras? And remember this EBV 68 virus is endemic in Honduras. The children were coming in by the trainloads under Obama. These open borders maniacs are going to kill all of us. So I was trying to get people to do what they could to enhance their immune system. It's a Kindle edition. It's not for the money. I was trying to help people fortify, supercharging their immune system against viral infection. And it's not about the money. It's about the wisdom and importance of the knowledge that I have that I'm trying to share with you. And if you want to be cynical and say, bah, humbug, you know it all, God bless you. I wrote about epidemics from EVD 68 and measles, tuberculosis. The same rules still apply. The same rules still apply. Many agree with me. And now we have an illness, and people are sitting there saying there's nothing I can do. Well, there's many things you can do. The most important thing is we should be imposing a travel ban right now. There should be an immediate travel ban to and from China. But the money at stake, the politics at stake is so great right now that I think they'd rather see 65 million people wiped out than slow the flow of money. This time I'm petrified. Virologist who helped discover SARS offers chilling take on coronavirus outbreak. He says, this time I'm petrified. And now they're comparing it to the 02-03 outbreak of SARS that killed over 800 people. People are saying, well, we survived SARS, so we'll survive this, right? No. According to an article in Zero Hedge, one of the virologists who discovered SARS, which, by the way, also originated from a coronavirus in China, paints a different tale of this latest outbreak. And the virologist Guan Yi of the University of Hong Kong State Key Lab of Emerging Infectious Diseases visited Wuhan. He says that he didn't see nearly enough being done to fight off the new epidemic. He said that due to the New Year, people were out at markets without masks and without any sense of the epidemic. He said that airports were not being disinfected. He said the local governments weren't even handling our out-quarantine guides to people who were leaving the city. So where it's going to go, we don't know yet. Now, I want to then go back to another epidemic, which you may have heard of. We all learned about it in high school. It was called the Spanish flu. Used to be a thing called the Asian flu. But with the introduction of political insanity, the same political insanity that is now eliminating art history at Yale University because it's too white, not because it's too great, but it's too white. They got to introduce Aboriginal garbage now at Yale University and compare it to that of Da Vinci. You hear? This is what's going on in the country now because of the psychotics who are running everything. But the psychotics are not limited to government. They're not limited to academia. They're not limited to medicine. The psychotics are everywhere. That's a bigger epidemic. There was a thing called the Spanish flu of 1918. 500 million people were infected with the Spanish flu virus. 50 million died. That's when the world population, U.S. population, the world population was 1.5 billion. 1/3 of the earth, of the people on the earth were infected, all the way out to the Pacific Islands. 500 million people were infected. 50 million died. Do you know how many people that is proportion to the population, right? So what happened to end it? Did some genius doctor come along with a vaccine, a serum? No. Something we all learned in epidemiology back in the early days when it was still being taught as a science, before they had to look over their shoulders and see if they were offending the Spaniards or the Asians or anyone else by renaming diseases. Something we all learned was that epidemics burn themselves out. It's about the only thing you can do is let it burn itself out. Maybe it's God's little joke on all of humanity when we thought we had it all under control. You know, if you're religious oriented, well, okay. Mankind thought he would just keep rolling along with a booming stock market, and with all his modern technology, nothing could affect man anymore. All we had to do was worry about impeaching Donald Trump, according to that fat slob Nadler, that knish with eyes, that human disgusting knish with eyes, a rotten knish. He looks more deadly than the SARS virus to me. That putz, a night school yuck. But how did the Spanish flu end? It burnt itself out. A second wave of the virus struck in late 1918. And what happened? It almost died out. And why? How did that happen? How did it just suddenly die out? A theory holds that the 1918 virus mutated extremely rapidly to a less lethal strain. Folks, this is a common occurrence with influenza viruses. There is a tendency amongst them for pathogenic viruses to become less lethal with time. Why? Because the people that they infected tend to die off. Do you understand that? As the hosts, meaning the people, of the more dangerous strains die from the disease, the virus needs to keep growing, and a less A less lethal strain or less lethal strains tend to mutate. That is our only hope. And also, obviously, common sense. Today, we're going to talk about the Chinese virus epidemic that could kill 65 million people, according to an expert who ran a simulation on this. We're going to talk about diseases without borders. We're going to talk about impeachment, mainly Biden's corrupt family, with Peter Schweizer at the bottom of this hour. He has a blockbuster new book. I'm very excited, so I'm mangling some words here. I'm trying to juggle too many different ideas at once. The virus has me very, very, very concerned. And I'm really not that interested in impeachment, but I do think it's so important to talk about the corruption of Biden's family. I'll be right back.
The Savage Nation. It's Savage on demand.
Look, there's a lot for investors to be optimistic about these days. We've been riding the longest and best stock market run since World War II, right? The S&P up over 400% since March 2009. But what about you? Have your accounts more than quadrupled in the past decade? Look, the truth is that most stock investors don't achieve the same performance as the overall market, leaving 2/3 of Americans still feeling like they'll have to work after retirement. So who's profiting from all these massive gains? Well, what would you do if you knew that the big banks and institutions tend not to follow the same advice they give you? And what if you could learn where they buy, sell, and make profit? Take the first step by signing up for a free introductory class with Online Trading Academy. You'll find out more about their patented investing strategy designed to help you trade with the skills and confidence of the pros. Visit otatrade.com/savage. That's a lot of words, right? But you're going to get 2 free tickets to a class in your area, and you're going to get your professional insiders kit just by going to otatrade.com/savage. Once again, that's otatrade.com/savage. And start knowing today, knowing what the big guys know. otatrade.com/savage. Trump, 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 Trump. Don't pay any attention to the outbreak, 40 million quarantine. No, Trump. That's all you should. According to Democrats, that's all you should know is about Trump and Ukraine. Ukraine is about the most corrupt nation on earth. So you have a president who doesn't want to send the aid until finding out where the money's going. Isn't that his job to do due diligence? Not to Schiff. I mean, Schiff just wants to send the money there because it flows right through Ukraine back into the Democrat pockets. What more do you need to know? And if you think Pelosi is out of this picture, you're mistaken. Look into her family's relationship to Ukraine. But no, just take Trump. Listen to Jake Tapper. He'll tell you the truth. Jake Tapper. Oh, don't get me started on that human being. The worst of them all is Jake Tapper. The absolute worst.
Michael Savage, a host like no other.
Are you looking for a way to save some extra money? Well, I would say start by paying less interest on your credit card balances. How do you do that? Simple. Refinance with a credit card consolidation loan from Lightstream. It's an easy way to save hundreds to thousands of dollars and lower your interest rate. Now, listen, Lightstream offers credit card consolidation loans from 5.95% APR with AutoPay. That's a pretty good rate. There are absolutely no fees, and you can even get your money as soon as the day you apply. Lightstream believes that people with good credit deserve a better loan experience, and that's exactly what they deliver to you. Just for my listeners, pay attention. Apply now to get a special interest rate discount. The only way to get this discount, listen, is to go to lightstream.com/savage. That's lightstream.com/savage. Lightstream.com/savage and slash your credit card interest just by going to lightstream.com/savage. Did you hear what I said? Rate includes 0.50% auto pay discount. Terms and conditions apply, and offers are subject to change without notice. Visit lightstream.com/savage for more information.
These kids have come. They've done well. Most of these kids, there's a lot of them, and they're not just Hispanic, they're Asian Pacific Islanders as well. And they, in fact, have done very, very well. In many cases, they're more Americans than most Americans are because they have done well in school.
Let's stop right here. Here's Biden the corrupt saying that DACA recipients are more American than most Americans are. We have a class on the Democrat side mainly who are so corrupt and so sold out to foreign interests that they're more dangerous than the virus coming out of China right now. And we're going to take a break from talking about the China virus and what you can do about it for a moment to talk about something that probably is as profound in terms of corruption. And that is Profiles in Corruption, Abuse of Power by America's Progressive Elite, with Peter Schweizer, who has a great new book out called Profiles in Corruption. It's an astounding book. Peter Schweizer, welcome to the Savage Nation. What a great book this is going to be, huh?
Thanks, Michael. Great to be on with you. Thanks for having me.
But, Peter, your book goes beyond the corruption of the Biden family, beyond Hunter, the brother. You can speak on Elizabeth Warren's son-in-law's secret deal with the Iranian Revolutionary Guard. You talk about Elizabeth Warren quietly bagged millions from corporations by levering her position as a government consultant. You talk about Bernie Sanders, the holy roller, Bernie Sanders, and how his campaign flowed tens of millions of dollars to a mysterious company linked to his wife. This is amazing. This is all in Peter Schweizer's new book. How corrupt is the Biden family, Mr. Schweitzer?
Well, I have to tell you, Michael, I've done research on Republicans and Democrats for years in my books. I've exposed people on both sides of the aisle. The most I've ever come in contact with before is a family with 3 members. In the case of the Bidens, you have 5 members of his family who cashed in while he was vice president. They got foreign deals. They got projects involving U.S. taxpayer dollars. They got special access in the White House, briefings given to their investors, all these kinds of sorts of things. And I've never seen anything this systematic done the way that Joe Biden has done it. So for me, it's unprecedented.
So, okay, in your book, you talk about Biden. You talk about others in the Biden family, like his brother, who's cashed in on it. Is Elizabeth Warren, Bernie Sanders, Kamala Harris gone? Amy Klobuchar, another one, pretends she's cleaner than the driven snow. So I want to ask you something. Do you touch on the Pelosi family in here at all?
I have not. I've done previous books where we looked at the Pelosi's. I did a book called Throw Them All Out in 2011 where we looked at insider trading on the stock market by members of Congress. And in that book, I exposed 60 Minutes did actually a really good story on this. They interviewed me. They confronted Nancy Pelosi about how she was basically...
No, I remember the insider trading, but Peter, you're doing a book now, this new one, Profiles in Corruption, and you're talking about the Biden family, and of course they're hiding Hunter's connection to Burisma. We all hear it, but Jake Tapper wants to make sure we don't hear it. The media works in overdrive to make sure we never hear about the corruption. But didn't it come out a few weeks ago that Nancy Pelosi's son had something to do with Ukraine, or am I mistaken?
Yeah, there was a report. I have not confirmed it, but there was a report that her son had been involved in Ukrainian energy company.
Well, what is this with Ukraine? Is Ukraine the most corrupt nation in Europe?
I think it's probably one of the most corrupt in the world. There was a Reuters reporter a couple of years ago who said there are things that go on in Ukraine that would make Nigerians blush.
Wow.
In terms of corruption. So it's terrible. And you find this, the Clintons did this. They go to these developing world countries or these countries that are coming out of communism like Ukraine that are highly corrupt, and they go in and they cash in. That's certainly what the Bidens did. They did it in China. They did it in Ukraine. In the book, we talk about the brother who has deals in Costa Rica and Jamaica. They deal with these smaller countries that are highly corrupt with corrupt political oligarchs that want something from America's political leaders, people like Joe Biden. And they know the way to do it is to juice in their family members. That's how business is done in those countries.
But isn't that how politics has worked from the beginning of time? Sort of, you get into office and you benefit from it personally while making believe the other party is the dirty one. I mean, since I've been a boy, I've seen this. You know, how do they make $160,000 a year and their fortunes go up from $1 million to $300 million? in 4 years. How does that happen?
Exactly. Yeah, look, this has been a persistent problem, but it's getting worse because just like we have talked and you have talked about the problems of globalization, our corruption is being globalized. Because, it used to be 60, 70 years ago, you might have some contractor who's giving a deal to a congressman who wants, money, federal money for some road to be built that they're going to do. But here we're talking about a global problem, foreign countries and governments who basically say the way that we get favors in Washington is by giving massive deals. So, for example, Hunter Biden himself runs a veritable United Nations of corruption. I mean, he's done major deals while his father was vice president with the Chinese government, with Russian figures connected to organized crime, with Kazakh oligarchs.
So why are the Republicans letting the Democrats run all over them over the last few days? How is this possible?
Well, it's a good question. I think part of the problem is, in my previous book, Secret Empires, I exposed the fact that Mitch McConnell, the Senate Majority Leader, and his wife, Elaine Chao, who's a cabinet officer in the Trump administration, have a very lucrative deal with the Chinese government.
Okay. So they don't want to open up the Hunter Biden can for fear that they're going to look at their own dealings. Is that it?
Yes, I think that's it for a lot of them. Look, I think there are people that want to look at these issues, but the problem is people in leadership, Mitch McConnell or Nancy Pelosi or others, those that have been there for a long time, almost invariably have gotten involved in some kinds of similar deals. Maybe not as extensive, maybe not as blatant, but they don't want this stuff to come out because it's going to blow back on them.
So let's talk about impeachment for a minute. Peter Schweizer, the new book is Profiles in Corruption, and it's an amazing book. We all have heard inklings, whisperings of Hunter Biden. They're fighting like hell to keep Hunter Biden away from testifying, right? But the Republicans are fighting just as hard to make sure that, for example, Bolton doesn't testify. Now, I don't know if you know Bolton. Do you think Bolton would actually turn on Trump in a trial like this, in a testimony like this?
I don't know Bolton personally, but I doubt it. I do think, to your point, that for Joe Biden, it's DEFCON, full-on DEFCON, to prevent Hunter from testifying. He does not want his son to testify. It will be the first time that he will have been under oath, where he has to start answering questions. And the problem is, we have financial records. I mean, I have them in the book. We talk about them in the book of the flow of foreign money. They came out in a criminal case involving Hunter Biden's business partner, who is involved in a bond scheme to defraud the poorest Indian tribe in America.
That was an awful story. Peter, I want to ask you something. The corruption stinks to high heaven coming out of the Democrat side, which is why they're fighting like hell to make sure Hunter, can't even talk about it. You're not even allowed to mention it to Jake Tapper. All you hear from Jake Tapper and the propagandists in Pravda is that Hunter Biden, it's a fake story, it never happened. They're really covering it up. But you have really told us today the reason that they're covering it up and why the Republicans are going along with it is because they don't really want an investigation of their own misgivings, right? Of their own screwed up dealings.
Yeah, no, that's exactly right. And look, it's all clear. If you look at the flow of money and the timing, look, the Russians move into Ukraine in February of 2014. In March of 2014, Barack Obama says Joe Biden is point person on Ukraine policy. Within 2 weeks, Michael, within 2 weeks, the Ukrainians say, we're going to put Hunter Biden on the board of this company and we're going to pay him $1 million a year, even though he has no experience and no background, doesn't even probably know where Ukraine is.
Didn't Biden, isn't he on record boasting? I'm talking about Senator Joe. Didn't he boast that he killed a $1 million deal or something like that? He's on record saying it.
Yes, he brags about firing the prosecutor of Ukraine. There's a controversial prosecutor who we know for a fact was investigating at the time Burisma and his son. He brags about the fact that he was going to withhold $1 billion in U.S. aid unless they fired that prosecutor.
$1 billion, and he's on record saying that, and Jake Tapper doesn't think that's a newsworthy story?
No, and look, here's the thing. Burisma, this energy company, is highly corrupt. It involves these oligarchs. One of the oligarchs runs Privat Bank, which is the major bank in Ukraine. More than $1 billion in U.S. aid dollars just vanished from that bank. just vanished from that bank. This is a guy who is involved in Burisma, and yet the notion that President Trump would raise the issue of Ukrainian corruption, saying, I want you to look into this, is somehow not acceptable. I mean, that is precisely what we expect our leaders to do, which is to investigate corruption, especially when taxpayer dollars are missing.
Why are the Democrats now demanding that they have Mike Mulvaney on the stand? What do they want from him?
Good question. I think they're hoping that Mulvaney, who has made some statements in the past that, let's just say, lack a certain discipline, he seemed to be kind of fast and loose with words. So I think they want him to come up and testify, hoping that he will slip up and say something that makes the president look bad. But, look, at the end of the day, I think the call was legitimate. I think that Donald Trump asked for them to work with his attorney general to look into this corruption. Zelensky, the president or the new leader of Ukraine that he was talking to on the phone call, his chief financial backer is an oligarch named Kolomoisky, who is involved with Burisma, who owned the bank where more than $1 billion of money was missing. So,
aren't you, Peter, come on. I know this business as well as anybody. I've written many best-selling books. You've written many big books. Aren't you afraid for your own safety taking on these corrupt oligarchs in Ukraine? I mean, these are bad people, Peter. We're speaking with Peter Schweizer, new book, Profiles in Corruption. Peter, you got a few more minutes after the break to tell us about that?
Sure.
I want to ask him about his personal safety. You're dealing with some of the most dangerous people on the planet. Doesn't he worry about it?
Home of borders, language, culture, the Savage Nation.
In an age of fake news and no journalism, there's a few people left who are doing that kind of work, and one of them is with us right now, Peter Schweizer. He's written some blockbuster books. He's got a new one, Profiles in Corruption. It goes beyond Biden. It's abuse of power by America's progressive elite. Peter, you're a brave man. Aren't you afraid of the criminals that you're stepping on a lot of toes here, Peter?
Yeah, we do step on a lot of toes. Look, we have to take security precautions. We do. We take that very seriously. I obviously can't go into detail about it. But, look, I mean, this is very similar to, the issues you've faced for the things you're saying. You can't be deterred just because you're afraid that somebody's going to be angry or somebody's going to take offense.
But, Peter, you're like the Jack Anderson of our time. Remember Jack Anderson?
Oh, I love Jack Anderson, yes.
Right, well, we all did. He was the guy who always had these exposés, okay? So now we have a corruption unlike any we've ever seen, and they're trying to throw it on Trump's back for withholding aid, when even if he did withhold it for political purposes, let's say he did, it's nothing compared to getting smeared off like the Bidens did.
Yeah. No, that's I think really the takeaway. I think
if anyone should be impeached, it should be Joe Biden should be impeached.
Yeah, I mean, I think what people would be really surprised by is the thoroughness and detail and the level to which they have self-enriched in the Biden family. The chapter in the book is 70 pages long, and there's no fluff. We get into all the specific things that he did. I mean, you've got a situation where, his daughter's husband basically started his company in the Oval Office. Joe Biden brings him into the Oval Office to meet with Barack Obama. Then Joe Biden goes and briefs the guy's investors over the course of the next 5 to 6 years. And
well, we heard nothing about it because Jake Tapper was probably focusing on some other important issue. What about, there's so much more in your book, the one about Bernie Sanders flowing tens of millions of dollars from his campaign to a mysterious company linked to his wife? Bernie Sanders, the communist, is corrupt? I can't believe it. I thought he was as clean as the driven Marx.
Yeah, this is very interesting. I mean, Bernie Sanders, of course, in his 30 years, has steered a lot of money, taxpayer money, also campaign money, to his family. And they found this...
But the main issue is the racism, sexism, and homophobia of Donald Trump. We must get rid of the racist, sexist, and homophobia of Donald Trump. People fall for that act. I don't know. I don't. I can see right through it. Peter, your book is great. I hope many people will go out and check it out. Abuses of Power, Profiles in Corruption, by America's progressive elite, way beyond Hunter Biden. I wish you the greatest success because you're doing great work. Thanks for being with us.
Thanks, Michael.
Great guy. Great guy. Great topic. When I come back, we're going to talk more about, I think the virus, the disease, why the government is silent, how the CDC and such agencies have become null and void in America. They were politicized during the AIDS epidemic, and they never recovered, in plain English. Is that clear enough for you?
The Westwood One Podcast Network. Fans of the spoken word, welcome. This is a podcast. Greetings, pod recipients. You are entering the Savage Nation. Read the book, see the movie. Warning, the Savage Nation contains adult language, adult content, psychological nudity. Listener discretion is advised. And now, the world's most exciting podcast, The Savage Nation, home of borders, language, culture. And here he is, New York Times best-selling author and National Radio Hall of Fame inductee, Michael Savage.
It is not the 1950s. It is the Savage Nation in the 20s. God, did you ever think you'd live this long to see what's going on like this? Here you've got a corrupt party, unlike any in the history of the world, the Democrats, with it stinks to high heaven. They don't want anything about Hunter Biden to come out. Everyone knows how corrupt that story is. But it goes way beyond. We just heard from Peter Schweizer, Elizabeth Warren's corruption, Bernie Sanders steering money from his campaign to his wife. It's unbelievable to me. Now, at the same time the corruption is going on, the Chinese virus epidemic is raging out of control in China, spreading like crazy, mainly, of course, in Asia right now, but it's not going to limit itself to that. It's now on alert in 22 states, but not one word from the CDC other than, wash your hands. All of the smart boys with expensive shirts and ties at the CDC can tell you is to wash your hands. So the corruption is epidemic. Medicine has been corrupted. Science has been corrupted. You've got a moron, a young child from Sweden who has no education whatsoever, who's now put on par with the leading economists of the world. Why? Because of Jake Tapper. If you have people with the idiocy of Jake Tapper and Wolf Blitzer and that type in the media, then you see a party of corruption. Then you could see a child with no education whatsoever talking about science and held on the same level as a scientist. Or a moron like Occasional Cortex talking about economics, saying everything should be cooperative. In other words, they should... Did you read what she said the other day? She said that Bezos made his billions, but he didn't make them. The people who make the stuff for him made the company. In other words, the workers in the factories, you know the old communist line, workers of the world unite, and that the only way to save the world, that moron says, is to turn Amazon into a cooperative. This is why I say to you, we're way beyond just fake news. It's fake science. It's fake art history. Yale just announced that they're dropping art history at Yale because it's too white. Yeah, Italian Renaissance art. I just got a report of another university where a genuine expert on Italian Renaissance art is now being forced to teach pre-Columbian art in order to please the Hispanics in his audience. Now, I happen to like pre-Columbian art. I have a piece of it right on my desk. See, Jim, right here? I have this guy's face on my desk all the time. I like ancient art of all kinds, prehistoric. Columbian is interesting to me, but it's nowhere near the magnitude of creative genius of that of the Europeans. It doesn't come near it. It's beautiful in its own way. But that's like comparing, hybridizing corn in a primitive manner to what's being done in a laboratory today. It doesn't really compare. It's brilliant in its own way. But why would you throw out European art unless you just want to appease the audience of those who can't even keep up with it? Anyway, so you got dumb people in America now, which is how the media works with dumb people. And the more dumb, the better for the media. The lower the IQ, the higher the fake news quotient. FNQ. I want to talk about the Chinese virus epidemic because I think it's an important story that's not going to go away too soon. It's not disappearing tomorrow. And you say, well, am I panicking you? Yeah, maybe I'm panicking you. This time a petrified virologist who helped discover SARS offers chilling take on coronavirus outbreak. It's on the top of my website, michaelsavage.com. And then I have a little book. It's only about $1.95 in Kindle, Diseases Without Borders. When I first published it, I asked the publisher to put it out in a Kindle edition so it's cheap, inexpensive for the average person to do something for themselves. It was not a money-making book, not to buy a new car. Everyone will get infected, says a nurse at the corpse-strewn hospital, says quarantine is failing. China built a lab, did you know this, to study SARS and Ebola in Wuhan, which is the epicenter of this viral outbreak. They built a lab to study SARS and Ebola in Wuhan, and U.S. biosafety experts warned back in 2017 that a virus could escape the facility that has become key in fighting the outbreak. So it may not be zoonotic coming from a bat in a soup. It could be that it escaped the laboratory. Health experts issued an ominous warning about a coronavirus pandemic not 3 months ago, and they did a simulation. It showed that it could kill 65 million people. Are you listening to this? Well, I hope you are, because these are very important stories. The Spanish flu killed 50 million people when the population of the Earth was 1.5 billion. 500 million, one-third of the planet, of human population of the planet, was infected by the Spanish flu virus. Did you know that? Meanwhile, officials in China are rushing to build a hospital in 6 days. That's how many people are sick. So what's the solution? Well, there's an immediate solution. You don't have to be an epidemiologist to know the solution. You have to have common sense. What you do is you stop travel from the source of infection. You go back to the basis of epidemiology. But no, that wouldn't happen. There's too much money involved. And secondly, you can't stop the flow of fentanyl and the other drugs coming in. You'd cut into too many campaign contributions. But I'm telling you right now, any sane nation on earth would stop it. They'd stop the flow of people coming in from China. It may be too late anyway because symptoms are not shown for 10 days. Again, I want to go back to Jon Snow, a legacy of disease detectives that you must know about, probably not taught anymore because he was too white. He didn't come from south of the border. But there was a cholera epidemic in London in 1854. Doctors and scientists didn't know what it was caused by. They thought it was caused by bad air. And they thought that particles from rotting matter and waste were getting into the air, making people sick with a disease. They didn't even know a name for it. But there was a brilliant physician named Jon Snow, just a doctor, not a PhD scientist, didn't work for the CDC, didn't attend Harvard. There was no Harvard. He had common sense. And he figured out that something other than the air might be responsible for this mysterious illness in London in 1854. So he goes around and he creates a map. I try to put it up on michaelsavage.com. I don't know if it made it. He made a map. We had a picture of the actual map that Jon Snow drew. And what the map showed was each person who got sick with this mysterious illness, showed them where they were, blah, blah, blah. And all of them had a connection in common. All the people who got sick had a connection in common. They all got water from the same pump at Broad Street. Hand pump, right? Hand pump. In September 8th, 1854, Dr. Snow tests his theory by taking the handle off the pump, and he stopped the outbreak. So he proved his theory, and he opened the door to modern epidemiology, which is close the pump. I mean, I learned this in Epidemiology 101 many, many decades ago. It's common sense, is that you stop the source of the epidemic. That's what you do. Now, I tried to do this with another epidemic, and I was roundly called every name under the sun, when all I was trying to do was apply common sense. But, okay, common sense doesn't prevail. Insanity prevails. Political insanity has infected virtually every aspect of human thought, whether it be art or science or poetry, you name it. Because of politics, there's almost no truth anymore. But I can't do anything about the nature of the world. All I can do is give you a countdown to where we are today, a countdown to Armageddon. And now it leads me to almost another idea here, which is if I want to bring in something odd, which is God. Do you think God is punishing man with this epidemic because of his arrogance? Remember I was saying pride cometh before a fall? Man had become so proud he could control everything. He thought he could control the weather, he could control the air, he could control the seas. And they said, well, we got all the diseases under control, said the bright boys with nice white shirts at CDC and Harvard, Berkeley School of Public Health. They all know everything. Maybe God said, no, you don't know everything. I say, well, come on, stop with the God already. You're an educated man. How could you believe in that? Man went from worshiping rocks, pebbles, shafts of light, leaves, feathers, and all of a sudden the idol worshippers were put out of business by those who worshiped a mysterious, unseen entity called God. Thousands of years later, we have temples, churches, mosques built to this unseen entity. No one ever saw the entity. Yet wherever you go, there are temples and churches and mosques built to this unseen entity. Many people they bow down every day. They do mumbo jumbo in different languages, praying to this unseen entity. It's not a rock. It's not the feather of a bird. It's not a shaft of light. It's not a shadow. It's not something you can put your hands on. You can't take it home and put it on a shelf. It's the unseen, unknowing God. Do you think this unseen, unknowing God is trying to put man in his place through this epidemic? What do you think of that one? I'll be back.
The Savage Nation. It's Savage on Demand.
It is Rock and Roll Friday. The world is getting more menacing by the second. Just when we all thought in our smugness that nothing could touch us, we wake up to an epidemic that's raging out of control in China, jumping to the U.S., 22 states now on watch with idiots in the epidemiology profession saying nothing. I saw a group from Chicago. I said, look who's in this field now. All they do is talk about how they spelled their names during a press conference. They gave the spelling of their names. They should have been talking about how you can bolster your immune system, that you should stay away from certain areas, that we should stop travelers from China. What is immunity? Our immune system is the body's legacy from millions of years of evolution. It's a multi-part, many-tiered, incredibly sophisticated system by which our bodies are able to naturally resist disease and infection, to fight off the invading viruses, bacteria, and other organisms that surround us constantly in our potentially hostile environment. Years ago, I wrote a pamphlet on herbs and immunity. You can't even buy it. You can't even buy it. It's not for sale. I'm trying to educate people, not sell you something. I'm not selling you a mat. I'm not selling you a book. I'm trying to educate you. You can actually use vitamins and herbs to enhance your body's natural immune system and make it as strong as it possibly can be, to allow your own body and its defense systems to ward off and fight simple illnesses such as the common cold and the flu. Yes, you can build up your resistance to the flu. I'm not saying it'll protect you against this one. Some organisms are so powerful, they're going to jump. No matter what resistance you may have. This one looks particularly deadly. It may have been created in a laboratory. China built a lab to study SARS and Ebola in Wuhan. And U.S. biosafety experts warned them in 2017 that a virus could escape the facility. That's now become key in fighting the outbreak. It may not be from bat soup, which they eat in China. It may not be from bat soup or snake broth. Okay? It could have come out of a laboratory. It could have leaked from a lab right there in Wuhan. Okay? You don't know about that. China installed the first of a planned 5 to 7 biolabs designed for maximum safety in Wuhan in 2017 for the purpose of studying the most high-risk pathogens, including the Ebola and the SARS viruses. This could have mutated from that one. Gentlemen, remember microbes do exist. I remember opening a book on that. I wrote a book in 1986, 83 called something about it, Maximum Immunity. It was in 6 languages. I still have it in Swedish, Dutch, French. Was robbed by the French, by the way. They stole the whole book. Typical French. They robbed the entire book, put it in France. We couldn't touch them. They have some kind of laws on copyright. They can steal your book. And nevertheless, I wrote a book called Maximum Immunity, and I talk about when I was a young grad student and studying cell biology, I met a remarkable man, a leading research psychologist, and he demonstrated to me how powerful the emotions can be in disease development and cure. And he cited case after case of individuals who were sick because of psychosomatic reasons. And one case in particular, I vividly recall, it was out of a banker in his mid-50s dying of, quote, incurable leukemia. Well, through talk and understanding, my psychologist friend managed to get this dying man to share a lifelong secret. that ever since he had been a little boy, he had dreamed of playing the violin and becoming a professional violinist. But his stern father had ruled out this choice as being too effeminate. Consequently, a very, very unhappy banker was created. And then at the end of his life, the banker took up the violin, thinking he was going to die, and almost miraculously against all odds, certainly against all of the available medical thinking, his leukemia went into remission. Fascinating, isn't it? Well, parapsychology, psychology. I almost went into psychology because of that story. Fortunately, my friend told me a story that kept me from changing my own life. Upon receiving his doctoral degree, he and the other graduates were all loudly celebrating with one supportive case example after another of psychosomatic medicine at a celebration. The esteemed professor of the then new science of psychosomatics rose to the podium, silenced the celebrators, and said, gentlemen, you must remember microbes do exist. Yes, my friends listening to the Savage Nation, microbes do exist, as do insects, allergies, harmful chemicals, radiation, the lack of protective nutrients, inadequate physical stimulation. All of these things matter. They matter right now. In order to bolster your immune system, look into your own health. We don't have to go into the details, but the fact of the matter is, it may not save you anyway if you're exposed too directly to someone coming in with this disease. And that's where our government is failing us right now. It's sick that our government is obsessed with impeachment while we have Rome burning. In this case, it's Beijing is burning and Nadler and Schiff are fiddling. This is a disaster to see how useless the political class really is. Take a look at how useless they are. You've got an epidemic raging out of control that's threatening the world, and this putz Schiff, this doughboy Nadler, doesn't mention a word about it. Instead, they continue with their persecution of the big lie, their prosecution with a big lie of Donald Trump. And there's nothing I could do about it because we, the people, have no power over this charade. It's all in the hands of 100 senators who will decide the fate of the nation. Isn't democracy grand? Isn't it wonderful to see how useful all of these highly paid senators really are? How useful Schiff really is, despite his starched shirt and forked tongue? When I come back, we'll talk about impeachment right here on the Savage Nation.
Michael Savage, a host like no other.
It is Rock and Roll Friday. We've been talking about the Chinese virus epidemic that could kill 65 million people, according to some simulations. Talking about diseases without borders. We're talking about Biden's corruption with Peter Schweizer. And now we move on to impeachment per se. We're speaking with Jenna Ellis. Who is she? You've probably seen her on TV. Constitutional law attorney, senior legal advisor to the Trump 2020 campaign. She's an attorney to President Trump and author of The Legal Basis for a Moral Constitution. She joins us now to discuss the Trump impeachment trial. Ms. Ellis, welcome to the Savage Nation. I hope she's there because I just hit line 1, but she's on line 10. Okay. Ms. Ellis, welcome to the Savage Nation. No, I guess not. Great job, guys. There's nobody there. Terrific. How about putting her on right now so we can talk to her? Great. It's called national radio. You know, it's not a rehearsal. Okay, line 10. Miss Ellis, welcome to the Savage Nation.
Thank you. Can you hear me okay?
Yeah, now it's fine. Yeah, we got 2 Dixie cups and a string here on the program.
Well, okay. You know, you're doing it old school. I respect that.
We are. Thanks for helping me pick up the broken glass on the floor. All right, let's look at the impeachment trial. We all know what this is. But you say that there are 4 legal problems. I want to talk about something else first, Miss Ellis. Why did Mitch McConnell permit the Democrats to get 3 full days of propaganda, and then the Republicans get to do it on a dead day like Saturday? How did that happen?
Yeah, you know, unfortunately, there is a precedent that was set by the Clinton impeachment trial, and this reflected that. Of course, this is a negotiation in terms of the process and the how of the trial. But, I've been a part of so many different trials as a defense attorney, as a prosecutor. I mean, all the way up to, murder and felonies. And we don't even get a lot of time for opening statements and closing arguments. I mean, this is a matter of a couple of hours, not 24 hours.
Yeah, how did they get 24 hours to crucify President Trump? This is nonstop propaganda.
Absolutely. And this just highlights and emphasizes why it is so important that we as the American people make sure that in every district across America and in every state, we are making sure to vote for people who will genuinely uphold and preserve and protect the Constitution, because majorities do matter. And we're seeing that because when the House is the opposition party that hates America, hates the Constitution, wants to remove the will of the American people who vested the sitting president, President Trump, with the constitutional authority of the executive office, wants to remove that unilaterally. They are weaponizing the power of impeachment. This goes back to the elections when you and I get out and vote and put people in office. And so we have to make sure in the 2020 election, every single vote in every single district.
Well, I agree. Look, I respect that you work for the Trump campaign. Okay, I'm going to vote for him. I'm 100% behind him. He called me 2 weeks ago. I spent 12 minutes on the phone with him. I was on Air Force One with him. I mean, very proud to know Donald Trump and to have had such a key role in him winning last time. But I'm a little worried right now, Miss Ellis. I'm a little worried by what I'm seeing when there's 3 days of crucifixion going on and the media is complicit. Of course, we the people don't vote. It's still up to the 100 senators. Is there any danger of any outcome besides an acquittal, in your opinion?
Not at all. And the reason for that is, thankfully, the Constitution embeds the protection of having to have a two-thirds majority. So there would have to be 67 senators. But again, this goes back to why it's so important that we vote in every election, because heaven forbid that the Democrats would have the majority of the Senate right now and would have that three-fourths majority to remove a sitting president for absolutely no impeachable offense. This is a complete circus. They are, of course, just lambasting, but the American people are tuning out. Nobody's really watching this. But this is all political propaganda, and that the Democrats would not hesitate if they thought they could get that two-thirds majority, and if they actually could, from removing a sitting president for absolutely no legal or constitutional reason.
No legal or constitutional reason. Correct. Right. Let's say we don't like the fact that he withheld aid for whatever the reason, but I keep saying on this show that as the chief executive officer of our purse strings, he has an obligation to conduct due diligence on what foreign aid is being spent for what. I don't understand why has that point been made, due diligence?
Well, 100%. And I think that we're going to see those points being made by the Trump legal defense team once they actually get to stand up and argue. But I have to highlight, they could not stand up and say a word. And legally, there is a presumption of innocence. There's a burden of proof and production on the Democrats.
A presumption of innocence in the mouth of Schiff. Schiff said the next election doesn't even count.
I mean, isn't this crazy? And so, of course, they're looking at TV optics. They are not looking for a conviction in the Senate. They're looking for a conviction at the ballot box.
All right. So they're really doing this for the election coming up in November. Is that, and you feel this is a slam dunk, Trump's free and clear?
Yes, 100%. I don't think that they will get to the 67 senators that they need. But of course, that's always the danger of these types of manipulations of the Constitution. And so, whether or not someone could get there in the future, an opposition party could actually oust a sitting president. That's the danger that this impeachment trial is setting. So for the people who are saying, conservatives, oh, this is just so boring, this is so ridiculous, that's all true. But there is an implicit danger here that next time, or at some point in the future, when the Democrats get a majority in both houses, that they would actually rise to that level and have the vote.
It'd be a nightmare. We'd be living in a different world. It'd be a third world nation at that point. But we're speaking with Jenna Ellis, who's a constitutional law attorney. She knows what she's talking about. She's also a senior legal advisor to the Trump 2020 campaign, an attorney for President Trump. Okay, so I'm on Trump's side. You're on Trump's side. But I want to make sure we're also on the side of truth here. I do not see an impeachable offense. Is there one?
No, not at all. And so, and the basic argument for that is, as you mentioned, the president's obligation to root out corruption and make sure that he's not giving lethal aid that is that is undermining national security interests and our laws of anti-corruption statutes. And so Article 2, Section 1 vests all executive authority in the President of the United States, not his subordinates, not Sondland, not Vidman, not anybody who serves the President. He gets to set foreign policy. So this is not an abuse of power. This is him executing faithfully and diligently the office by which we, the American people, vested him with that specific limited power. So abuse of power is absolutely ridiculous here. There's nothing. And let's remember that the uncontested facts are that Ukraine did get lethal aid, and they did get that within that, which is over and above what the former administration did under President Obama, and they got it within the same fiscal year that Congress designated it for.
Yeah, but to be fair to the argument, they're saying he did it after he was in trouble already. I heard the whole argument, but that's irrelevant. I have to go back to due diligence. The president has an obligation, not a right, an obligation to conduct due diligence on all foreign aid, whether it's to Ukraine or Israel or anywhere else. So I don't understand where the crime is here.
There isn't one, and they're manufacturing one. I mean, first it was, this is going to be bribery, this is extortion, and they couldn't get those. You
remember they were using the words bribery? That went on, bribery. They tried that one, it didn't work.
Yeah, so now they're just manufacturing this narrative to try to make it sound like a wrongdoing that they don't have any evidence or even legal substance for. So abuse of power is a manufactured offense that is not impeachable, and the facts just do not support it whatsoever. And obstruction of Congress. I mean, this is just ridiculous that every single president throughout American history has had the privilege of the executive to make sure that no national security information is given out in the wrong context. But the Democrats didn't have time to go through the proper legal channels and have the judicial branch arbitrate whether or not their subpoenas were legitimate. So now they're saying, President Trump, just because you won't be subordinate to our branch and you won't comply with a meritless attack and investigation against you, now we're going to say that you're obstructing us. I mean, can you imagine if you or I were being investigated by local law enforcement? We have no obligation to comply with that investigation, and then suddenly they're saying, oh, we're charging you with obstruction of law enforcement. No, I mean, this doesn't rise to the level of obstruction of justice at all. That's why they didn't charge it that way. They're simply trying to say, President, you are subordinate to us. We wield all the power. That's what the Democrats are after, and it's so clear on their preferred article of impeachment, their title, obstructing Congress. That is showing the American people they just want all the power, and they want to damage President Trump for not yielding to their perceived and manipulated outcome here. And it's just
yes, but if there wasn't a corrupt media, we wouldn't have even gotten to this point. And what I'm worried about is we've had 3 days of Schiff putting on his slideshow of the same lies he put on in the House of Representatives. He was never called on the carpet for it because of Jake Tapper, Wolf Blitzer, and the other gang that apparently works for the Democrat Party. And tomorrow, the Republicans get a chance to rebut it on Saturday when it's known as the Twilight Zone of television. But they're going to be back Monday and Tuesday after the opening arguments. Look, if this were in a court of public opinion, who's winning right now?
Well, I still think that the president is absolutely winning because the American people are seeing through the Schiff show. But of course, the mainstream media is fully complicit. And, if you watch, Tucker Carlson did an amazing collaboration of all of these just glowing terms that the mainstream media are talking about Schiff, calling him this brilliant, dazzling lawyer. I mean, they are trying so hard to help.
I know they put Schiff on a pedestal. I've seen it. They've used every card they could, including his religion, which is disgusting to me. They're trying to make him untouchable. I think he's as corrupt as they come. But that's irrelevant. I don't like the man. I don't like his eyes. There's something wrong. You can't comment as an attorney. I am telling you as I stand here, those eyes are more telling than people might believe. But we're not in the court of public opinion. We're in the Senate. That's the court. When does the vote actually come down onto convict or not to convict? When does that happen?
Well, so that'll be determined by the Senate. Right now, we have the possibility of 3 days. Now, the Trump legal team may not take up all that time, but they certainly are planning on presenting, of course, a defense because, unfortunately, this is in the court of public opinion as well.
Wait. The Republicans, in addition to giving the Democrats the first 3 days, may not use their 3 days?
It depends on the legal team, and it depends on their strategy for this. They don't have to use all 24 hours.
Oh, I'm sorry. I'm starting to get a very itchy feeling about something inside of this Republican game doesn't make sense to me. I hope I'm wrong.
Not at all. No. So Jay Sekulow and Pat Cipollone are excellent attorneys. They're 100% on the side of the Constitution and President Trump. What I think they don't want to do, and of course I don't want to get ahead of them, but what I think they want to be careful of is to make sure that they are presenting the arguments that they're not boring the American people in the same way the Democrats have. So they may or may not take all of their time, but then after that, the Senate gets 16 hours of questioning for both sides. They may or may not take up all that time. And then
16 hours. Okay, I got it. So that's going to be 3 more days?
So then after that, so they'll get the 16 hours, and then after that, there will be a determination of whether or not to close the proceedings and hold the vote, or whether or not there will be witnesses at that point. So,
oh my God! So if they call out witnesses, this could go on another few months or weeks at least.
It could go on a couple of weeks, depending on if they call witnesses and how many they end up calling. So that's still yet to determine. And it's my hope that a majority of the Senate, because this is a majority vote in this context, they would have to be 2/3 only for conviction. But a majority will stand up and say, House Democrats, no, this is a sham. This is a weaponizing of the system. It stops now. We are done. That is my hope, that a majority, that 51.
How many votes do they need to vote for witnesses or no witnesses?
51. That's the problem.
Oh, so that's just simply a majority, not a 2/3.
The 2/3 is constitutionally required only for conviction, but the process of the Senate is by majority vote. Okay,
last question of the day. You're brilliant. You know the whole game. What's the chance of them peeling off a couple of votes from the waffler Republicans right now?
Well, that's really why this is a case made to 4 or 5 senators, because we know that that most of the Republicans are sick of this. They see through the sham. We know that most of the Democrats are sold to the other side, but there are also a couple of senators, West Virginia, Alabama, a couple of those Democrats who are in very red states. They're going to have to contend with their own elections, and they may end up having bipartisan support for a motion.
So we may get a few of their side as well, which we never hear about from Jake Tapper. I want to thank you for taking the time today, this Friday, to be with us on the Savage Nation. Jenna Ellis, legal advisor to the Trump campaign. I thank you very much for being with us today on the Savage Nation.
Thank you so much. And read both of my pieces in Fox News to find out more about what exactly is going on. We
will. Look forward to meeting you one day. Thanks for being with us.
Home of borders, language, culture, the Savage Nation.
The madness of our times. The madness of our times. Dead bodies in hospital halls amid coronavirus outbreak in China. And Schiff is droning on and on with the big lie over and over again, stuffing their faces with candy, no less. Stupid. Meanwhile, the trans community is after a professor. Oxford professor gets two bodyguards after threats from transgender activists. Can you believe this? Jim, did you hear that? An Oxford professor, a woman, feminist professor, no less, was given 2 security guards to protect her from potentially violent transgender activists because some things she wrote on her website. So in other words, everything in our society is now being run by the violent. The violent. Whether it's the impeachment being run by the violent Democrats, coming up with now a new charge, obstruction charge. As far as I'm concerned, Schiff should be charged with obstruction and boring the world to death. I wish there was a charge for boring the world to death. They should take Schiff out in handcuffs for eating too much candy and boring the world to death and giving himself bug eyes that scare children and pets. All of what you missed today can be had on michaelsavage.com and on my podcast later today. It was a great show. Thanks for being with us. See you Monday.
The Westwood One Podcast Network.